Welcome to Daily Cyber episode number 294. We're almost at 300. This is awesome. Got a lot of great guests coming up this year, this quarter. So many great guests that are coming in and talking about different technologies and solutions and AI and cybersecurity and governance and compliance. So make sure you share this out with your family, your friends, your colleagues, your partners, whatever that may be, because we have a lot of great experts coming on and talking about, a lot of great strategies, solutions, challenges that they're going through, but also, providing insights and tips and golden nuggets of what they would do in your situation and what they're going through from themselves with the organization and with their customers and clients and they're working with. So Daily Cyber, I think, has really grown over the past couple of years to really develop, some great experts and guests that come on here and just share their expertise. So I'm really excited, which brings me today. I've got Bill Wilcox. He's the CISO and CTO at ProArc with over 2 decades of experience in cybersecurity, cloud architecture, and enterprise technology. He works directly with organizations to design and secure complex environments, helping them navigate emerging threats, especially at the intersection of AI and infrastructure. Now, this is a big topic. I'm really excited to get in with him. So grab a coffee, grab a tea, and let's hack at it. Welcome, Ben. How are you?
I'm great, Brandon. How are you doing?
Pretty good. So thank you so much for coming out. Lots to talk about, I'm sure.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk about the topics today.
Awesome. Now, one of the questions I really kind of want to jump in, because I know you have a lot of background, you have decades of experience. How are you seeing the industry change from year to year, from when you kind of first started to where you are now?
Well, in the early days, what do we have? We had antivirus. We had maybe a Barracuda spam filter,
right.
A firewall, perhaps. Early when I first started there, it was early days of firewall. A lot of public internet accessible computers at that point. So I think we've come a long ways. When I first started really kind of getting into the cyber side of this, because I grew up in the business, the technology side, system integration, and then I really started getting into the security aspects probably around 2010. And even in 2010, it was pretty, you put a solution in place and you hope it does its job and things slip through, and it doesn't always necessarily work the way that you're expecting. And then we started building more proactive security programs, right? Ones that, hey, we wouldn't come in and just go do a vulnerability scan once a year anymore, right? We would do it continuously and start building kind of a repetition, right? So, one of the things I kept hearing from customers, and I kept observing myself, we come in, we do a vulnerability assessment, a pen test, and then, we give a laundry list, right? 500 items here, you got to go fix it before next year. Half the time you come back and, more than half the list is still not done, right? It's just too immense and never contained. So, I think with that repetition of getting things prioritized and stuff over the years, we've gotten better at helping be proactive with security rather than reactive. I think we're continuing to do that. Kind of an interesting, I think, twist in all that is around 2020, we started seeing, the real push of new software, new platforms to help manage all this, right? A lot of tech coming in. And what I started observing is that people started losing the fundamentals in their security programs. A lot of them, especially if they, they're focusing on, hey, tech can go solve this, or maybe the more mature ones at compliance obligations were still there, but a lot of the businesses that were looking to do, hey, keep me secure, right? They're relying on the tech side to handle it. Well, then they started letting go of the fundamentals of what they need to be doing internally to their business to keep things going. I'm seeing an uptick today of, hey, let's adjust the way that we're doing our vulnerability management platforms, right? How we're prioritizing, how we're addressing the age of, mythos or fable, right? How do we make sure that we're reactive and we don't handle a 30-day patch window the same way that we used to, right? That's not possible.
Right.
So in some ways, tech got us a little lazy, and we have to go back to the fundamentals and kind of start looking at business resiliency, things that we're able to do, and frankly, a lot more people had interest pre-COVID to that stuff, and I'm starting to see kind of an uptick back into the basics today.
Yeah, just kind of the base foundation, like to do the work, right? Not letting the tools kind of drive the program. I mean, tools are beneficial, all these AI tools, and you have your SIM, you have your vulnerability management, you have your patch management, but you still have to do the work. And I totally agree with you.
That's a big piece, and take identities or any other aspect of where most of the vulnerabilities are coming in today. Like, a tool is not going to necessarily, you don't want a tool to stop it. You want it there as a safeguard.
Right.
Let's do the pre-work that makes your environment hardened. Let's make sure that we put the right controls in place so that we're not granting the keys to the kingdom when an exposure does happen.
Right.
But that's the type of work that we really need to focus on today.
So with that being said, what's your top 5 areas that you would say for businesses that their priority for this year to start working on security?
Oh, well, there's a bunch of them in there, but I think probably number one still, and this has been, I've been preaching this for the last couple of years here, is identity. Whether it's your, if you're in the agentic era, right, focusing on your AI, and making sure it has identity, right, and your
Right.
and as well as looking at your users. The things that have helped me sleep better at night, right? Passkeys, organizational wide.
Okay.
You don't have to worry about your passwords being compromised. You don't have to worry about those pesky 2-factor authentication phishing attempts, right? Where you're the man in the middle anymore, and those breaches, which are so common these days. The identity is where I would start, right? Start getting those fundamental controls. Start getting your users moved to passkeys. Start graduating from just MFA, right? MFA is required on everything, and frankly, we're still seeing gaps when we come in and work with customers in that space. But roll out things like Windows Hello, right? That gets you 50% of the way there to not using passwords anymore. It's really a passkey type of system. So those types of things can be really good. Frankly, I also believe very much that we still see a lot of business email compromises and those types of attacks, right?
Right.
Those are still primarily identity driven as well, and so that being a big piece to stop it in the future, I think this is certainly key in there.
Now, got a question for you. So you're talking about identity access management. Are you now looking at identity as the individual person employee, but now you're also looking at identity as the application and software?
Yeah, because you have these enterprise apps, right, that have access to all sorts of roles that are if you were to go into, I'm going to choose Entra because I live in the Microsoft realm, but if you go into Entra and you go look at your enterprise apps, you will see that they have tons of permissions into things, right? If the users, email systems, teams, you name it, across the board, they have access. And historically, the default context was, hey, let's let users, grant themselves permission to, have access to these things. And then threat actors started realizing, hey, this is a big giant backdoor, right, for us to be able to access environments. All we need to do is get an app key or compromise this app, and next thing you know, we're able to get in. That happened to Microsoft a number of years ago.
Right.
I think it was Midnight Blizzard came in and had access to some email accounts, and then they compromised more accounts, and they came in through these secrets. Well, if we kind of extrapolate on that, right? Every app, if you take a mid-sized organization, a couple hundred employees, you probably have 1,000 different app registrations sitting in there. And all of those things, right, they're tied to vendors, they're tied to, maybe partners that you have. It could be apps that you've written yourself, and the owners have long since moved on, right? And you have this legacy stuff sitting out there. Those are all risks, and so those need to be looked at as well. And managing your app identities is certainly a big piece of that.
Right. And I think the challenge that you talked about, and we'll probably go into a little bit deeper, is that tools like AI can incorporate into your desktop, your email, like you name it, right across the board. And as we're talking about, like, it's not just it has access to do, read, write. There's actually things you can set up it so it's taking action. It's responding to email, all that. So that's that next level. Like some of the tools, like, I mean, you got your iPhone, right? Or your Android, and it says, oh, it wants access to your camera, your, this, that, and your contacts, and does that. I get that, and they're potentially pulling information. But now with the AI, it can actually do more action. And depending on what you're doing, it can actually take an action. Versus might be pulling data. And I mean, we'll go to privacy and all that, in a different conversation, or maybe today. But with AI, I think the concern is that you might set up a script, you might set up a skill, you might set up an agent. It's doing some activity. Well, the threat actor knows how to manipulate that. I mean, it's full open door, right? If it's taking action, they respond to email. Well, guess what? They compromise that some way. Now they have all your contacts. Now they have all your emails. Now they can respond to it. And if for me, and look at instant response, I'm looking for malicious activity. Well, it's not malicious because your agent's doing it. They just compromised it. Right now, you're like, hold on, there's no indicators of compromise because the agent's actually responding to emails. But we saw the malicious email. We don't know what's happening, but of course you can do more investigation. But right at that incident, you're looking at it's the AI. The AI is supposed to be doing what it's doing, right? But just kind of extrapolating of what's possible, right?
Yeah, and I mean, when you take that, what you just described, right, there's so many inputs and outputs that are possible there, and decisions being made by these agents, right? And where's this agent running from, right? Is it running from the cloud, or is it running from your desktop, like you said, right? Yeah. And guess what? We have tool lack of visibility today in the security realm, right? There's not great tools that look at agent activity on your endpoints. Not yet. I mean, it's coming. Guaranteed it's coming there, but there's a visibility gap. Sure, your EDR tool can see things, but and see the actions, but is it seeing what's happening within the agent and the context around that to understand, are there other threats in there? Is it being manipulated? No, it's not, right?
Well, as you and I know, some of the threat actor tools they use are valid tools that companies use. TeamViewer, I know that. I've been instance. TeamViewer is a remote tool, remote desktop, RDP. Like all these are real tools. It's in the context of how they're being used, right? So same with the agent. The agent's a real, integration with your solution. It's doing what it's supposed to, and if someone manipulates it, now it's the question of when it was manipulated, how it was manipulated, and like you're saying, the actual forensics now, it's not there yet where I can't call Anthropic and go, hey, can you give me the logs for this? And they're like, yeah, no, we're not get a court order. Like you're not giving any logs, right?
Good luck raising any support there.
Right? Exactly, right?
They're not going to help you. I can't even get visibility into a bill. So right. They're certainly not going to help on that front. But yeah, that's a huge concern, right? Is that visibility gap, and I'm very hopeful that the security vendors are going to close that up this year.
Right.
Better telemetry, better visibility. But until that point happens, we're kind of in this netherland, and hoping that our agents are doing it, or we're putting enough controls and enough education with our end users that they're making good decisions around what they're doing with the agents.
Right. So identity access management expanding. That's number one. So 3 more, or actually 4 more areas that you're thinking about. Okay, we need to secure this year.
Oh, absolutely. The next one is data protection.
Okay.
I'm a big proponent. And when we talk about data protection, I'm going to go with data security in regards to things like Purview, right? Where we're able to classify, label, and encrypt sensitive information. I've just seen too many instances over the last couple of years, especially in that era of co-pilots and AI where the visibility is there for the AI to get to it. And before we were obviously having through obscurity and not knowing where things were, but AI has this wonderful thing called graph that it can access, right? And graph surfaces all this intel and knowledge that's around, and frankly, it's perfect, right, to help ground your responses and get the pieces in there. But sometimes it surfaces the wrong thing, right? I had an example the other day where I had some notes that I was putting into a PowerPoint. And frankly, I had great notes. Well, one of my notes referenced something regarding another company, right? Okay. And so I end up presenting, and here's this other company's name right in the middle of my presentation because I reviewed it, but I missed it.
Yeah.
The other company name was still in there. And the fact was, like, it was in that document. AI thought it belonged in there, right?
Right.
For some reason, it said, "Oh, well, you're representing this company, and I'm going to put it right over there in the small text."
Right.
But I missed it, and it's instances like that, or surfacing like another one. We had a customer we were working with some Copilot on, and rolling it out, and we get a note that, hey, one of our employees is accessing another PIP plan for one of his coworkers. Well, in looking at it, what had transpired is the employee had asked, "What should I be focused on today?" And Copilot went out and said, "You know what? You're in the same group with this other employee.
Right.
The manager says he's in a PIP and it's due today. Maybe you could help him complete the PIP successfully."
Right.
So, improvement plan like that's certainly some confidential information that you wouldn't want to get out there. And really, that was just an ACR problem. What
right.
it boiled down to is that user had access to this folder. They didn't know that they had access to it, but the SharePoint administrator or whoever was in charge of that site had the wrong permissions on there. So
right.
that data piece is really kind of critical across the board. It's keeping the sensitive information sensitive and letting your systems know that hey, this is something that maybe shouldn't be touched. You could do it like if it's really sensitive, right? Grouping so that there's a label that you can't leverage in certain systems, or if you have intellectual property or other sensitive stuff that you don't ever want to leave. And frankly, that type of governance, right, where you start having to get it in place ahead of time or as you are progressing in your maturity, is certainly critical. And we've seen kind of like this realm of, I'll call it data swamps.
Right.
Right. We've stored and retained all this data for years. Is it useful to the business?
Right.
AI is showing that it's not useful to the business.
So one of the questions I have for you is this, that you're talking about, a lot of data access, least privileges, kind of that. What about recorded data? I mean, I don't know if you're seeing this a lot, but I'm seeing a lot of like these recorders jump up in a Zoom call or Teams call, and they're recording the meeting, right? What's your thoughts on that?
The question is that a commercial version and you have the right T's and C's on the other side that protect the information from leaving your organization?
Right.
Those are the ones that concern me, like recording of Copilot and staying within the company that the partner that we're working with. Not a big deal. Like that's fine. It's these other ones out there where you don't necessarily know if they're on the free version, right? Is it data processing? So having to ask questions around like if you're in this meeting, I'm happy to send you the transcription of this, but hey, we don't allow third-party AI that we don't know to record the meeting. So,
right.
We've had to establish some AI baselines and guidance for our employees around what's acceptable, what's not, and frankly, that's certainly a concerning piece for me.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the concerns for me is that depending on the meeting, right, and depending on like if you have NDAs with people, and also you start talking about private information, but now you have one of these recorders on there, you don't know unless that is like self-hosted, where that data is going, who's going to have access to the notes after, if that could be shared. if that's now, in an area where it's not secure and or encrypted, as you and I know, you talked about business email commerce, say it's sitting in someone's email and all of a sudden it has financial information, confidential information, and a threat actor gets into that email and they're scanning through it, they're dumping that person's email, and all of a sudden they have a list of their vendors, their financial information, access to what their systems and topology is, and like all that. And you barely gave like the threat actor a roadmap to some of your customers, right? And your partners. Like, that's my concern, because again, as you know, and I agree with you, like the data side, we look at least privileges, RBAC, role-based access control, and limiting that separation of duties, trying to control access data. But now we've got this other point of where data is being collected, but I don't know if it's the scrutiny of the securities around it as it should be.
Oh, I concur. It's probably not. And one of the things I always think about too is, right, emails one thing, at least it's internal, but now that stuff's tied into these CRMs.
Yep.
Right? All these CRMs, and they love to take these notes, and it goes out to your customer profile and ends up in there. I've gotten 5 breach notifications in the last week regarding a CRM that's been compromised by threat actors, and it's from 5 different vendors, and my information's out there. There. So that's the type of stuff you got to worry about, right? Because now everyone wants to talk about your business, right? How's your business? What's top of mind for you, right? The typical sales 101, right? Understanding how your business is doing, how they can find value. But yeah, those recorders are leaving it out there, and if you're just having vendor conversations, those recorders, I think it's good to understand where does it go, who's responsible, is there breach notifications involved, right? At least I'm getting these notifications. I don't know how many I haven't gotten, right? But,
how's the data stored after when it makes the notes? Right? Is it in plain text? Is it encrypted? Is it easy to be accessed? Is it in the cloud? Like all that stuff. Is it, two-factor authentication? Is there role-based access in it? So you can set different types of, like all those things would be the questions I ask. Like I don't really use any of those recorders, but those are the questions I would be asking before I would ever implement it into a customer's, business, and or, be in a meeting where it's there. It's like, okay, hold on. Because do you really know where the security, if you want to talk about this confidential, critical information, and you have a recorder, do you know where that data is going? Because you might think, oh yeah, it's fine, don't worry. But like you said, what if it's recorded in the cloud, right? Everyone's like, oh, it's in the cloud, it doesn't use much data, it's in the cloud. But what if they get compromised? It's not encrypted. Now they have all their customers, 1,000+ customers, that now that threat actor just downloaded all that data, all those recordings, and then with AI, as we know, they'll just put in the AI, scroll through it and say, hey, look, find me these companies with this information that talks about X, Y, their access, their topology, that information, and just give me a report. And then boom, you have a report now of companies that they can go after. It's just, to me, it's a security risk right now until the tool gets more due diligence, and then people do more due diligence on those tools.
Yeah, I mean, in those tools too, those tools should be able to do the classification I just described, right? You should be able to classify that recording, that meeting sensitivity. If we're having a executive security briefing on an event, like probably not recording it, but if we are, certainly classifying that meeting very high, and making sure that everything is encrypted and so forth. So, like those types of things are certainly super important, I think, as we look at how technology is using. It's great advantages, but where's the risk, and is that risk acceptable for you and your business?
100%. So we got identity access management, we got data. What's number 3?
Well, there's this wonderful thing that I used to do a lot of, called business impact analysis.
Okay, yeah.
And these BIAs, right? It used to be, we'd go talk to the business. We'd understand, how they're generating their revenue. Right? What are the processes that are most critical to generating that revenue or continuing operations, right? So at the business level, right? Security is important, but it's more important on the context of, is this going to allow us to keep running, right? the context of the business wants to put in. So the business impact analysis is really designed to talk to the business, understand, right, what are the critical systems here, how are they tied together, and understanding where there's weak links in that, right? It could be something as simple as technology redundancy, right? You don't have the right redundancy in place. Or maybe there's dependencies within application to application. What that leads you to start understanding is how much, when an impactful event happens, right, what is an acceptable RTO, RPO, right, recovery time objective or recovery point objective for that application, right? Things as they start becoming core dependencies, right, and understanding where they are in your business,
right?
Those are going to be at the very top, right? Get those restored first. Also help you can prioritize your recovery objectives on these things or plan future investments around them. It's also really good to start understanding how the business operates and if something did happen in the future, because most of the time when we ever talk about backups or recovery, someone's got a plan, maybe it's tested, but none of that's really tied to a business outcome, right?
Right.
And how's payroll get processed?
Right.
Guess what? Security incident happens and you are in an all down event. People still need to get paid.
Right.
Right. It might not be the top priority at that moment, but like that's one of those processes that needs to happen. Or order processing, or right, like what's the failback in some of these scenarios? And you might not get through all of that in the business impact side of it, but at least you're going to start understanding where the priorities are from a tech perspective, how that aligns in the business, and how that impacts the business long term. I remember this was probably about 10, maybe 11 years ago, got a call from a business that they needed an incident response. Everything's ransomware encrypted, and turns out backups were impacted. Luckily, their cloud backups weren't impacted.
Okay.
But the problem is the recovery from the cloud. Right, it was super long, slow. Couldn't get it back fast enough. They had terabytes of data that was needed to run their business. They were, by the time that we finally were able to get them back up and working, I think it was probably 13 days later.
Okay, yeah.
Right, because this was just huge amounts of stuff. They were in, had huge data pieces there. It just took too long, and frankly, the cloud recovery was just way too slow. They were 2 days away from going out of business when we talked to the two owners of the company.
Right.
Had it gone on 2 more days, they probably would have lost their customers to contractual obligations. They're starting to run problems into cash side of things. Like they weren't able to process anything and weren't able to get bills out. So like not every business has a large amount of resiliency in there. And that's really where like these business discussions start helping you as a security practitioner or security stakeholder understand what's important to the business, right? How do you get your, put the right things in place for the tech to stay resilient and the business to keep running.
Now, when you've done your business impact analysis, what's the 1 or 2 things that you found that you're like, they just don't get, like they don't understand this aspect of it? And I'll give you an example. Sometimes when you're looking at the, failovers, your backups, the restoration, like you just talked about that. I know I had a customer, it's 48 hours for us to get our backups from Veeam, and we're going to do that. But then we did a tabletop action, it's actually 72 hours. I'm like, whoa, what do you mean it's 72 hours? But by the time you make the request, they extract the drives, they go through, they test the drives, they now do the scans on the drive, they ship the drives out. You're not going to get them for 72 hours. And depending if it's on a Friday and they're overnighting them, it could take a little bit longer just because of the courier and shipping. Right? They're trying to get you like by Sunday, like if it's Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. But again, it's still going to take time. And they're like, hold on, we were told 48 hours. And like, yeah, I think they told you 40 hours from when they actually packed the drives in the box, Purelator, FedEx, whatever that may be, and they got them out. They didn't talk about the other process there about testing, extracting the drives, testing the drives, doing the scans on the drives, which takes a day to 2 days in that alone. And like, whoa, I never knew that.
Yep.
I ask you is what is that, 1-2 things that you found as you were doing your BIAs?
Probably the most common one is that the assumption that a backup is a resiliency strategy.
Okay.
The best way to address that is to make sure you have a tested restore path tied to the business process that you're trying to do there. So, like that payroll cyber, right? How do you get payroll back up and working? That's a resiliency strategy of how to handle that, pushing it forward, at least from that recovery side. And then I think infrastructure resiliency is probably another big challenge because nobody knows necessarily which system matters most. Sometimes you end up with not knowing who the owner is and what the recovery sequence is.
Mm-hmm.
And so that can be very challenging when approaching this is that they think that they know, but frankly, when you have, another example, when you have 2,000 VMs that are all encrypted,
right?
Where do you start, right? That requires thought ahead of time to be getting it into the right mode. Otherwise, it can be hours. Or maybe you're focusing on the wrong thing altogether, and you have to go pivot because now you just wasted 2 days, right, trying to get something up and working, and you realize, hey, that's not the most critical thing that I need. So, going back, right, it's all about the business processes in there and where that is. So those are the 2 things that I think are probably the most shocking for most.
The one thing I found to add on to this is dependencies. I found as the companies I was doing BIAs, they had the main system, but they didn't realize the dependent process people that drive secondary dependencies or processes under that. Oh, that was impacted if this goes down, right? Yeah, we have email while that, but if we don't get email, you're not getting the registration from this other vendor that you get every Friday. That's a key thing for your actual operations. Oh, hold on. What do you mean we can't do that's down? Like, now, how do you do that? Like, is it a phone call? Is it a fax? Like, what else is that process you'd go through? And they're like, what do you mean? But our email's not down. I'm like, no, you're down. Fully ransomware, fully encrypted. Your email is completely offline. What do you do? And they're just kind of I wouldn't know. Like, accounts payable, accounts receivable. Okay, you have to do payroll that, yeah. But you also are paying your vendors, right? And you have a certain point where you're not paying your vendors where they start shutting down your services. Oh, hold on. What do you mean? And then trying to draw that out for them that it's not just these main emails, servers, internet, right? Your manufacturing. There's processes underneath where it can be impacted. That was one of mine takeaways from doing a BIA with people. It's like having to ask, but then what? Yeah. What else is attached to it? But what else runs that process? And they're like, well, I think that's it. Okay, can we bring someone else in? Okay, hey, how do you work with it? Oh, I actually do that. And it's very critical. And they're like, you do that with that? You're like, yeah. And then you start making notes like how it's all intertwined, right?
One of my common ones, I used to see this a lot more. I think I see it less probably because of the fact that there are more cloud native organizations today than there used to be, but it's still there. Is, hey, I have a DR site, right? I have a DR environment. Well, okay, so let's talk about how you're down today. How are your users going to access that DR environment?
Right.
Well, they're going to VPN in. Well, your VPN over there is only limited to whatever it is, right? 50 users or whatever it is, right? You can't go through 500 people on there.
Right.
So what's your plan there? Or, well, we're going to send everyone home, and then they'll use low desktop or whatever else to get into that environment VDI. Well, okay, if it's not in the cloud, how are you going to scale that? Because your hypervisors are limited over there. So those types of things, right, as you're describing, right, you haven't thought through the full process of what happens, right? You got an investment. We used to see the NetApp used to always sell everyone two SANs. Right. I used to see this. Oh well, I got a SAN copy over here. That's my DR strategy. Well, your hypervisors are over here. What are you going to do?
Right.
So, it's great that you got a copy of your data. You can pick it up and move all your stuff over there and buy some new servers. What's your plan? So you got to really think it through and understand.
100%.
where that
I
goes.
think one of the takeaways, anyone listening to this, I mean, Ben, you're bringing a lot of great information. Do a stress test. So I'm gonna draw this out for people. There's tabletop exercise where you kind of talk through it and you have you have your lunch and you're drinking donuts and you're kind of versus a tabletop exercise with a stress test. I recommend people when they're going through the BIA, the business continuity disaster recovery, their incident response, they do a stress test tabletop exercise with limited time. Things are going down and really going through it because that's what's really going to happen in the real world. Not, oh yeah, I talked to this policy. It looks okay. I think it's good. We're gonna good. And then when the fire happens, you're like, what do you mean the backups didn't work? What do you mean their servers aren't coming up? You got to go through that stress test because if you don't, and I think that's when you do you do your due diligence when you go through the stress test because you really learn. That's like for that example, that backup. I learned that because I had the vendor on there for the backups and we were doing the stress test. Okay, good. You have a ransomware event. This is happening. Go. What do you do? Okay, you call this vendor. You got that. I'm notifying that. We're getting your CERT team. Great. The backups. We're going to test the backups. Great. How long is the backups going to take? Oh, it's 72 hours. And they're like, what? What do you mean? Hold on. What do you mean 72 hours? Time out. Okay, we've got 72 hours. And I'm like, no. They're supposed to be here 48. And now discussion. I'm like, good. Now we have a discussion point because if you were in an incident right now, that wouldn't be good if you're down for 72 hours. Expecting to be up in 48, right? So
if the business is expecting it, and sometimes look, those conversations are the most valuable, right? The things that people say, right? Well, IT says that 24 hours is an acceptable recovery time,
right?
What if finance says it's 4,
right?
Because it's their application and what's something that's super critical to them. Well, now you got to go have a tiebreaker, right? That's where the CFO or whoever it is that is the decision maker in there. You start talking about it. All right, if you want 4, right? Today we have 24. If you want 4, it's going to cost you X, Y, Z. And is that worth it for you to be able to have that? Oh, well, probably not. Okay.
Right.
Those conversations are good ones to have because then you're not the one that's holding the bad news, right? You're setting it at the very top. So I like those things because why defer your a lot of these things have happened in the past where organizations have set arbitrary values, or maybe a vendor did, or right, that person's long gone, and someone gets caught holding the bag and has to then fix the problem. So those are great things to surface.
100%. So, guy, identity expand data, business impact analysis. 2 more.
All right. I am a big proponent of better unification of tools. So I like platforms. And the reason being is I think that we have, as security professionals, too many bespoke tools that don't talk to each other. I like the visibility that single platforms give across a stack.
Right.
And I feel like if there's certain risky areas, sure, add another tool on in there that you feel is like the most appropriate, right? Like you've got some customers that like to run 2 email tools, right? An AI tool and a traditional AI machine learning one. Fine, that's great. If you have the budget for that and you can afford that, that's great. Frankly, I put my money into putting passkeys in place versus that.
Right.
But, I think that unified threat visibility, right? Because we all know that the threat actors, right, they want to move as fast as possible, and they will there, and they're living in those little blurry lines in between the different things. And AI has just made that so much more muddy, right? And then having more tools where things are moving in and out, and you have to go to 15 different interfaces to understand like a compromised environment. That's 14 too many.
Right.
So,
you want one pane of glass.
Yeah, one pane of glass. Let's see what we can see across the board. Generally, we have better telemetry because it's all tied together. So, for me, when we start talking about being able to respond to threats from like SOC perspective and a security analyst view, single platform.
Yeah,
I think is certainly key.
One thing I'll add for people that are watching this, I recommend at least every quarter, if you can, or maybe every 6 months or 1 year, to do an assessment on your tools and see what you're utilizing and what capacity and utilization of those tools. Because I find a lot of times there's duplicate tools in the environment. Sometimes I go in there and it's like, it's 2 EDRs, it's 2 SIMs, it's 2 this. It's like, hold on, why do we have, well, one does that and one does this. It's like, did you actually evaluate the tool? It actually, this is the one you got first. It actually does that. And yeah, there might be gaps in one area, but you can circumvent that or complement that by your EDR. Like, why'd you get 2 EDRs, 2 SIMs, 2 this, 2? Guys, you're spending so much money in a security program where you can cut down and be more efficient, right? Like in things like that, I find where I was like, okay, you're using it 50%, why not 80% utilization of that tool? Like in all the features and all the functions, and really kind of looking at automation and integration, like all that. I find smaller companies to mid-sized companies really need to do that over and over again.
And frankly, it's vendor push too. I see it a lot with vendors, right? The vendor finds a point at that moment where they think that it's hey, we can go solve this problem and get in there, right? And now next thing you know, you have like a tool that does what you want, but also has this other capability over there. I was talking to someone just last month, 4 different vulnerability management platforms in their environment, and they all overlap the same things.
Wow.
And frankly, one platform, they actually have 2 full platforms in their environments as well. So you can imagine that there's cost, there's better ways to do it, and frankly, who's running all these tools? No one's paying attention. You can't run these all over the small team. So
100%. Yeah.
You really do need to either, if you aren't in a full platform that can look really across all the layers, that has to be one of the evaluation things this year.
And then last one, what would be your last area that people should focus on this year?
So once you've gone through your identities, you've worked on some of your data protection, you've been able to do some business impact analysis, and you've got a great tool stack there. I love device trust. So going back to the side of like looking at, how do we make sure that we're trusting everything from an identity perspective, right? Treat your devices as that as well. So, looking at things like Intune, things that can tie into your conditional access policies, and make sure that your device is still in a compliant state before it accesses network resources. I put this at the very last piece because, frankly, we have great tools, right? If you have platform stuff, right, your EDR tools, right, people are compromising identities because it's way easier. We've done a great job, right, keeping our systems up to date and so forth. But there's still a need in there, right, that your system's still managed, it's up to date, and it should be verified that it's company owned before accessing the environment. Right. So the device trust ensures that you're the right trusted endpoint, and if you're not managed, hey, guess what? You don't get to access the company environment.
With that being said, anyone watching this, make sure you go through your due diligence of configuring it properly. I think that's the biggest thing too. Like I totally subscribe to what you're saying, but you got to make sure it's, you don't have an outside professional service person come in. And I've seen this. I don't know if you had, they come in, they configure it, they run into a problem, and all of a sudden they have a back door, a port open or something like that because they were doing testing, but they left it open when they're done. So now a vulnerability scan comes in or a pen test comes in and said, hey, we found this port that's open. And you're like, whoa, why is that open? Oh, that looks like it's been open since, 3 months ago, 4 months ago. And that hole has been open since the professional service came in because you didn't get it configured properly. So always, my point of view is always put these tools in place, configure them, have the trust, make sure they're secure and hardened, but then you do due diligence to validate it after. If you do a vulnerability assessment right after it's configured to now confirm, 100% do that after just to make sure, because you don't want to have it, I trust them, it's okay. I mean, us security people is trust but verify, right? So I'm like, verify everything's secure, because I've seen that. I saw one where I went into a customer and the access control list at the bottom was any. And I'm like, who set up your firewalls? Like, okay, like how long ago? Oh, it was about a year ago. Has anyone evaluated your access control list? No, the vendor did. They set it up. I'm like, you don't have a firewall. No, we have a firewall. No, you don't. You basically have an open door.
Well, and that's true with like firewalls, Entra, like, these conditional access policies that are part of your identity, they are your modern firewall. That is how you're being protected. And those same mistakes happen on those, right? You literally have to go through and make sure that it's designed to the standard that was expected and that it hasn't drifted. And if it hasn't drifted, why has that occurred, right? And it's what you described, right? Someone opened up something to test something, right? MFA wasn't working for this one user, and I forgot to put them back and make include group.
Right.
Well, there's better ways to do that. Number one.
Yeah.
But number two, right? Those drifts need to be surfaced in a manner because those are risks that might be lurking in the background, and hopefully your pen tester finds them or whoever else you're working with, but hopefully it's not the threat actor out there that's probing.
100%.
Where that is, right? And so it's a lot to put on a pen test to hope that to surface that. So look at all these little conditional areas, right, where there's rules and seeing if it matches what it should be.
Yeah. 100%. Now I know we got 10 minutes left, about 10 minutes left in the stream. Quick question for you. What's keeping you up at night? What is this one thing that you're like passionate about keeping you up at night this year?
It's AI security for sure. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was just putting together some metrics and I looked at the agents that we have, and the company, we're about 500 people in size, and our agent population is approaching the same population as our end users.
Right.
And so, where we're doing and the controls that we have in place, because things do move very fast. And so I do have a very unique role of being kind of the CTO and CISO. So I have to think about things from what is it that we're putting out to market? What are our solutions that we're working with and so forth. And I love the innovation side, right? The same side, I'm scared of the innovation side because there are so many lack of visibility, lack of controls in place at this moment. So we're trying to find that frequent balance and constantly trying to keep up with what is changing in the AI space is very hard. I mean, pick any day and you got something new, right? New method, new model, some new capability there, some new way to do an agent, some new framework, and we're all learning at that. So the AI risk, I think, is probably the big one for me as we start moving towards that more autonomy with agents. So we're certainly being very cautious when it comes to how we're doing agents, and making sure that people are building them in a manner that gives the right telemetry, that gives the right visibility, that keeps the human in the loop. But it's really easy to make an agent that can just go do things these days.
100%.
So
now, for you as a CISO, what's the biggest AI misconception you hear?
Biggest one probably is hey, I don't have a good way to stop it from doing certain things. And the reality is that you do have methods. We don't have control across the board, but I'll just give an example. In the Microsoft realm, we help establish standards across the board of how to do AI securely, keep it within the environment, even multi-cloud, and allow it, the security organization and IT organization to have control. Because there is a lot of value to the business to democratize the use of AI. I mean, one person writing agents for your company isn't going to be nearly as effective as 100 people writing agents and getting into the hand of the end user to do that. So you really have to focus on creating the methods of how they're allowed to do the things, versus just saying no, because people will find their way to do it. And I've seen that countless, right? You tell someone that they're going to have to go back to doing something manually after they just completely streamlined it. They can do it in an hour, and now it's going to take them 16 hours. Guarantee someone's going to find a way, right? That shadow AI is going to happen, and people are going to make it occur. So I think it's really important to give your organization approved methods and spending that time to kind of think about that approved method, or working with partners to find, hey, what's working, because we all need to learn from each other at this point. No one's a complete expert on what's next on AI.
Oh, 100%. And I think the thing for most companies need to understand is be more restrictive at first and create controls around it, and then slowly start to test and open it up. Don't just kind of open up and test and just wish and see, right? And pray, right? Hope and pray that, oh yeah, no, we'll be fine because we told these people not to. Okay. Telling someone, I mean, even if they have good intentions, they could make a mistake, right? Like, and we've seen this. I've seen this in instant response where security engineers, senior security engineers have clicked on links in the middle of an engagement, right? And we know it was the threat actor, right? Like I've seen stuff like that where people make mistakes. So with AI, you're busy, you're doing something, you upload something quick, you're not paying attention, and it's also all the financials for the company that you've just put into AI, right?
Yeah.
It happens, right? So in my thing is that puts, the guardrails there, put the policies in place, try to put controls, maybe even restrict role-based, right? Role-based access to AI, right? Like kind of do that and then slowly start to build the program within the organization, right? That, say, for example, you're developer in coding, then you get your coders do it, but they have to follow software development lifecycle. And there's a strict software development cycle that they don't just trust any code. They don't grab something from GitHub and put it in there and run it, and then all of a sudden they put it into production and Bob's your uncle. No, you go through development, you test it in a sandbox that doesn't have exposure to see what it does, and then once you've done your Q&A, your end-to-end testing, then you can go publish it. Then you can go public. Like all those controls, which most companies want to do and potentially do, I think some of them are circumventing because the speed of AI. They're like, okay, AI can do it. They must know, Anthropic, code like Claude, ChatGPT. They reviewed the code. We should be fine. And just let's get it out. Let's go. Right?
Oh, I have some stories on that front. I maybe we'll have to save that for another day. But like just the velocity of the code development is causing immense risk because people aren't necessarily thinking about. It's the same as the quality of your prompt input, right? If your quality of your prompt input, if you're letting AI make decisions for you, then you've lost control of your security. And it's true with your code. Right. So you got to have a guardrail set. You got to have standards defined. This is how you do it, right? This is what my what do they want to call it? Your markdown file is going to have, and this is the way that we do it, right? You have to ground those tools.
Right.
People end up in big risk.
Well, I think the barrier of entry is so much lower now because I don't have to know Python. I don't have to know, HTML. I don't have to know that now because I can say, hey, write me this script. I want to do X, Y, and Z, and I want to automate in a script or a batch file, whatever. And then it rates it for me. It's like, okay, run it. Then you tell it to run it and you see fix the error. Like you're telling this code, this AI to do all that where normal programmers and scripters would have to do troubleshooting. And I remember like when I first went back in the day, wanted to do code and you look at thousands of lines and it's a decimal that's off because that's the error, but it's taking you hours to go line by line to find that decimal. Well, now ChatGPT, Claude, that's doing it for you. No problem. They go through, we found the error, we fixed it, we ran it. Now there's no error. So you're relying on that and more trust and faith is in the AI tools to do that. And now we're kind of walking away. No, it tested it. It's good. It ran. No errors. We're good. Now we can go. And I think that's where, like I said, that's where that gap is. And I think that's what you're saying too, is we need to kind of still do the due diligence. We still need to do the testing.
Yep. We've done all, because reality is like going back to just being a human coder isn't possible. And I don't think we're going to be heading that way, right? People have seen the efficiencies. It's great. But we just have to get better with the tools that we have access to and start leveraging some of these other new platforms out there that can really make better decisions around what's a vulnerability.
Right.
And, because we are going to have massive amounts of code out there. Like that's a reality, right? Like companies are going to build their own apps. Whether they're production grade or not, that's a different question. But like the one that we just built a platform and it's very AI centric. Did a lot of AI based code in it. We went through static code analysis, dynamic code analysis. We had all the different tools in our pipelines to be able to look at it from a security vulnerability perspective. We did manual app pen testing.
Right.
Each of these things surfaced vulnerabilities that had to be fixed. What some of the challenges we started seeing is that these legacy tools, right, can't keep up with the fact that some of the code necessarily changes as fast as it does, right?
Right.
And certainly the team testing it can't keep up because the next version they get looks completely different, and you're like, wait a second, what happened here? Well, guess what? GitHub Copilot just rewrote everything because we changed the spec, right? So
Right.
it's beautiful, but now we're back to retesting everything. Then we tested also M-Dash, which is Microsoft's new agentic dev test program. Basically, it has tons of different agents that all looking at code in different areas, and it's really able to parse it out. So we thought we had everything fixed.
Okay.
Guess what? Tons more vulnerabilities that we had to go fix because it's a new way to think about it. And right, I think we're going to get a lot better at fixing vulnerabilities, and I'm very confident at that. The fact is that we have to update our processes and our skills to be able to do that as we start moving down this direction. And frankly, we're not quite there yet, but I think we'll see a lot this year in that space.
Oh, 100%. Now, I know we got a couple minutes left. Any closing thoughts?
And from an AI perspective, I think we covered a lot in there. But I always like to think of things from like a tactical model, right? If you haven't done it, think about it from who can use AI, what AI or what data can AI reach out there, right? Think of it from a data flow perspective. That's always kind of critical. Which plugins, connectors, agents, or automations are you going to approve in your organization?
Right.
We had a salesperson join about 6 months ago. And it's the first time any salesperson ever asked me for an API key to our CRM.
Okay.
So what are you trying to do? Oh, I'm building an agent.
Right.
I love it. That's great. But no, you can't have that. But like, we'll build something for you if that's where you were going.
Right.
And then thinking about like, how are you going to get that visibility into those pieces, right? Those prompts, the output, risky behaviors, right? Do you have the tools that can do that? Or are you in a platform that doesn't give you that visibility and you're just relying upon your end users to make good decisions?
Right.
So that from a security lens is probably one of the really critical pieces, right? The other stuff's all pre-work and defining where those risks are going to be allowed. But if you can't see that output, right, there's always the things that you don't know.
Oh,
and,
100%.
right? Those things are surfaced. And then always the last one, if you start building agents in your company, when that person leaves that built that agent, who owns it going forward? Because previously that agent was owned by someone and managed by someone. Now you have this identity out there.
Right.
And I've already seen hundreds of agents that have, are being used, but they don't have an owner. So that means that there's also no understanding of how things drift and responses meeting the same business criteria that you're expecting. Is it still doing the same security grounding that you're expecting? So
well, does not fall under the same kind of principle? And I think you've seen this too, is if you develop a product or service on a company laptop, it's the company's, product and or service. So if you develop a process or an application or something like that, it's actually a company. I feel if it's the AI, if it's, if they have a corporate version of Claude and you're doing Claude and you're doing the agents and the coding and the skill set and all that, I have a feeling it's theirs. It's the company's.
The company needs to own it going forward. So who's taking responsibility as you exit the door?
Right.
What's happened in the past is it's an HR role that falls into IT that tells them what to do, but then IT forgets that they have agents sitting out there.
100%. And I think that's going to be, like you said, another line item into what, when you're going through their account and restoring their data and all that and transferring over. By the way, check their AI account and go through, and you're going to have to look at how to extract the MD files for the skills and this and that, like all that stuff, right? So
it's valuable even, right? Like it could be just using tokens and it's posting something to to their email. Who knows?
Yep.
Those are all things that need to be looked at.
100%. Now, best way to get a hold of you, Ben, is that your LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn. Username is Ben-Wilcox.
Yeah, so just on the screen, so if you guys are watching it, it's linkedin.com/in/Ben-Wilcox. And then ProArc, the website's proarc.com. Ben, thank you so much for being here. This was great.
It was a great conversation, Brandon. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome. You know, it was great learning so much information from you and just kind of going through like all the due diligence and stuff that we've talked about. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Awesome, everyone. So, I mean, that's the end of today's Daily Cyber. As you guys know, like there's just so much we're going through when it comes to like cybersecurity and infrastructure. I mean, Ben talked about like kind of the 5 main things you got to look at in this time frame, like identity access management, data protection, business impact analysis. It's core thing you need to go through. If you don't understand what your business is, the infrastructure and how your business runs, you run into an issue, trust me, in an instant response, you're going to learn very quickly and it's going to be very painful. If you do that ahead of time, it's going to really help you. Unifying the tools and having like a one pane of glass and making sure everything intertwines. And so you have visibility across the full environment. And then device trust, being able to have a way of having the devices communicate, but also in a secure manner, right? So they're all connected, all communicating, and be able to trust the devices in your environment are the ones they're supposed to, especially if you don't, you can find rogue devices. I know I have seen environments where someone's plugged in a router, right? And then's been running a server, something along the line. And you're like, how did that get there? But they had tools to be able to scan the environment to go, that shouldn't be part of our environment. And they're able to go find it and disconnect it. So a lot of great conversations that we got today just to learn about just overall security. So go back, watch this again. I mean, Ben gave a lot of great information. So don't forget, software is hackable, being connected is vulnerable. I'll see you next Daily Cyber.